Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I really appreciate you tuning into the channel. I do not take your audience for granted. Today we want to delve into the Auto Scaling Group. The Auto Scaling Group is one service on AWS that you can actually use to set up your EC2 infrastructure and your load balancer and things related to that. In the last video, we looked at setting up your load balancer. All right, but then we looked at that. We had to set that up manually. So we had to set up the EC2 instance first of all, and then we had to create a load balancer. We had to create, the target group and everything manually, one step at a time. But the purpose of having an auto scaling group is to basically automate that process. Now, if you look at the last video that we did, all the instances that we created was actually deployed in a single availability zone. Okay, but then if you're using an auto scaling group, that would not be the case, because the auto scaling group will actually ensure that your instances are spread across different availability zones depending on the number of zones you have in that region, and of course the subnets that you have configured in that region as well. Now, if you have a region that has 3 availability zones and you have configured, let's say, 2 or 3 subnets in each of the zone, then you can actually, write your template in such a way that auto scaling group will ensure that your instances are deployed across the availability zones in that in the region rather. Okay, so that is basically what the auto scaling group will do for us. Now, the auto scaling group leverages what you call a launch template. Okay, I mean, before now it was actually a launch configuration, but that has been deprecated. But then now we're using what you call a launch template. Now, the difference between the launch configuration and the launch template primarily is the fact that the launch template can be versioned, right? Which means you can have different versions of your launch template, and then you can apply each of the versions based on what you want to do and your use case. But the launch configuration doesn't have that, particular quality. And that is one of the reasons why it's been deprecated. And then you're transitioning now into a launch template. So without wasting much of our time, let's get right into, the meat of the matter. So let's go to the EC2 section and let us, get our hands dirty on how to set up an auto scaling group. All right. So I'm going to click on the EC2 instance. Okay. I think I already have that opened up here. All right. So this is my EC2 section. And if you scroll down here, you can see that here you have what you call a launch template. And then, of course, if you scroll down, you can find your auto scaling group right here as well. Now, if you look at this place, you shouldn't see anything like a launch configuration because, it's been taken out of the console, right? So what you have is the launch template. Now, I just want to show you something here for, your understanding. Now, if you click on launch instances, you have this beautiful interface, right, where you can give your server a name, choose your, your instance, the AMI, the OS you want to run. You can also scroll down to choose your instance type, select your key pair, configure your networking, and, do pretty much whatever it is that you want to do right here. Now, the only difference between this interface and that of the launch template is the fact that if you're using this interface to launch your instances, you don't have the privilege to actually configure your instances to be deployed in different availability zones, which means if I come here now and I increase the number of instances from here, so let's say I want to deploy 3 instances, automatically here to give me a notification telling me that if I'm launching more than 1 instance, then I should consider using EC2 auto scaling. Because if I'm using this interface, for example, all my 3 instances will be deployed in a single availability zone. And the reason is because if you scroll down here, under the network setting, you do not have the privilege to select the subnets, right, that you want to deploy your 3 instances into. So here you can only select just 1 subnet. All right. Here I can only select 1 subnet. I can't select multiple subnets. Okay. And that is where the auto scaling group launch templates comes into the picture. With the auto scaling group launch template, which is actually similar to what you have here, the difference now is with the launch template, you can actually select multiple subnets. And that will basically tell auto scaling that you're deploying not to 1 subnet, but to this number of subnets. All right, so that is the difference between the launch template and the launch instance page that you see, all right here. So let's go back to the launch template. So let's click on launch template. I mean, that's the starting point. If you want to do anything with auto scaling, you have to create a launch template. Okay, so here I'm going to click on create launch template. All right. I mean, if you look at it, like I said, the interface is somewhat similar. There really is no difference between what we have here and what we just saw in the launch instance page, right? So it's similar, but then it gives you some flexibility to choose the number of subnet or that you want, and then that will determine the number of instances that will be created eventually. So here I will give my launch template a name. So I'm just going to call these, all right, free DevOps. Okay, class, I mean, just something. So template version description. So you can describe your template. All right, I can just say version 1, V1, for example. I mean, of course, if in a work environment, your organization should have a naming convention for everything, right? So you probably you will use that. So here you scroll down. So here you select the AMI that you want to use. So if you have your own AMI, I mean, if you have your own created AMI that you've stored already, you can also browse already AMI, or sometimes it can also show up here as well. So, but then we're going to go with a quick start AMI, and I'm going to click on Amazon Linux. Let's use that. And of course, we're going to be using the Amazon Linux 2023 AMI for this particular purpose. Now scroll down. So here, now I can also decide to choose the instance type from here. And of course, by the time I'm setting up my auto scaling group, I won't have to do that. All right. So let's go with T2 micro. That's the instance type that we want to use. And for the key pair also, you can also include the key pair in the template. Right, so which means there are things you can include in the template, there are things you can actually just say, you know what, I'm going to just skip this and then do that some other time. So that's also possible. So the key pair will add that as part of the template. Now for the subnet, we're not going to add that as part of the template here, because if you had it as part of the template, it means that here you can only select one subnet, like we saw with the launch instance page. Okay, so I'm going to come here and say don't include in template, which means by the time I'm setting up my auto scaling, I can select my subnet at that point. But for now, I'm just good with what I have here. But of course, you can select your security group as well. So here I'm just going to go with which one are we going with now? So let's just check again. All right, so I have these class subnet, right? These are the subnet we created together. So the VPC that they are based on is actually the BA1, all right? So I'm going to come here and select that. So this is the default security group for that VPC. So select that. All right, and here we don't have any, I mean, we really don't want to do anything here. So for the EBS volume, you can expand that if you want, all right, and then you can change this to GP2, I mean, delete and termination, you can leave all of that. And another thing that we want to do here is to include our user data script. Okay, we use the user data script for the load balancer, right? So we're going to include that here as well. So I'm going to go to advanced details and scroll all the way down. And right here, all right, let's create a simple bin bash. Okay, so I'm going to say yum update -y, and then yum install httpd okay -y as well, and then yum enable httpd. All right, oops, that's not the complete command. So it's yum sorry, not yum. I mean, sorry about that. So that should be systemctl. All right, systemctl. All right, enable httpd. Okay, and then you have systemctl start httpd. Okay, so I mean, if you're running it normally on the terminal, it will be sudo systemctl enable, but then we're doing it with user data. So with user data, the commands are actually executed using sudo. So you don't have to specify sudo right again. So systemctl enable HTTP, that would ensure that the next time the server is booting up, the HTTPD service is started automatically. All right. And then we want to pass something. So echo. So we're going to pass these. I mean, this is what we passed in the last videos. So we're going to say greetings, all right, from, so we're greeting from, so we'll pass these. So we're doing command substitution. So that will be host name, -F. So don't forget to close the bracket. All right, and then close it like this as well. All right, or you can actually just make sure you grab like this. All right, and then you close it like this, and then you pipe that, all right, into your www.html, okay, /index, all right, .html. So basically, what you're doing here is that you're creating the index.html, and then you are passing into that file greetings, and then it will print out the host name for you. I mean, we saw that already in a load balancer video. Of course, I'll put the link to that video in this one so that you can watch that to understand exactly what we are doing right here. All right, so with this now, I think we're good to go. So now I can come here and say create launch template. So I can say create launch template. So my launch template has been created. Now I can come here now and scroll down and go to my auto scaling. So click on auto scaling group, and then here click on create auto scaling group. So you give your auto scaling group a name. So I'm just going to call these, all right, class ASG. Okay, so here you select your launch template. So now, if you have different versions of your launch template, all right, you can also select the version you want to right here. I mean, that is the difference actually between the launch template and the launch configuration. I mean, you can version your templates. So select that. And here it gives you some kind of information about, the launch template, and you can see the version right here as well. So that means if I've modified this template, over and over again, I'm going to see different versions here. So I can come here and actually select the version that I want, and that is the version that will be applied. All right. So I'm going to come here and say next. Now, actually, you can also override your launch template, which means some of the values of, or things that you selected in launch template, in the launch template, you can actually come here and override some of those things if you want. Okay, so that provision is available. So here, we're selecting our network. Remember, we didn't select that in the last, when we created a launch template. So I'm going to select this and select our class VPC. All right, so here, availability zones and subnets. So here now, I have the privilege of selecting the subnet that I want. Now, normally, if you're creating a launch template or you want to deploy anything, your EC2 instance, ideally, your instance should be in the private subnet that has a NAT gateway connected to it. Okay, but because of cost and all of that, so we're just going to stick with the public subnet. I mean, just to avoid the unnecessary NAT gateway cost. All right. So I'm going to choose the public ones, and I think we just have 2 public and 2 private. All right. So now that has given me the privilege to actually select the subnet that I want. So which means auto scaling group is actually going to deploy my instances in these 2 availability zones. Now that is if I have 2, all right, instances that I want to launch. But if I'm only launching just a single instance, then auto scaling group will just choose one of the subnet, randomly. But if I'm deploying 2 instances, then auto scaling group will ensure that one is in 2A and the other is in 2B. Is that okay? So let's click on next. So now we can actually attach a load balancer at this point, but it's actually an optional, all right, phase. So which means you can attach a load balancer later. Okay. But what you can actually do here is you can actually just click on attach to a new load balancer. So that means in the configuration phase of the auto scaling, you can also create a load balancer that your instances will actually leverage. All right. So I'm going to come here and say we're using an application load balancer. It's going to be internet facing, not internal. All right. Internal is if you have instances that you want to load balance internally, and then you want to have another load balancer that will expose, okay, the endpoint of the internal load balancer. Is that okay? But for our own use case, we are going to make sure that our application load balancer is what is internet facing. Okay, which means the endpoint is actually accessible publicly. That is what it means to be what? Internet facing. All right. So these are the 2 subnets that we've selected, and of course they've been pre-selected for us already. So now we don't have any target group, so we have to create a target group. Okay, so click on create a target group, and this is basically class ASG1. It's going to do that for us automatically behind the scene. All right, so VPC lattice, we can skip that for now. It's a new thing that AWS just came up with, so we can skip that. So I'm going to click on turn on Elastic Load Balancer health check, which basically is to allow Elastic Load Balancer to monitor whether instances are available to handle requests. So if you check this, which is actually recommended, your load balancer is going to also, try to communicate with the instances that you attach to it to ensure that the instances are available to accept incoming traffic. All right. I mean, the load balancer must know that the instances that are connected to me are actually healthy and they can handle incoming, all right, traffic. So you have to enable health check for your load balancer as well. And having done that, let's click on next. Now, this is where things get interesting. So here you have to configure the group size and the group scaling. So here you have what you call desired capacity. You have what you call the minimum and the maximum desired capacity. Now, desired capacity here basically is the actual number of instance that you want to run initially. Okay, so what is the desire? What is the actual that you want? So the actual cannot be less than 1, of course. All right, so you can have 2, you can have 10, you can have 5, but then desired capacity actually, what it means is that what is the actual number of instances that you want to have at this point in time. Okay, so here I'm going to say 2 desired. Now here you have the scaling, so which is the minimum and the maximum. All right. So here you can set limits. So the minimum desired here means that it does not matter what happens, okay, regardless of the outage, regardless of the issue that you may have within your environment. I mean, it should not go below, all right, 1 instance. All right. So the desired capacity that you see here is the actual. The minimum is, the worst case scenario, at least 1 instance should still be running. Okay. The maximum desired also means it does not matter the number of traffic that we're getting. All right. This is the glass ceiling. All right. Which means the instance cannot scale above this particular number of instances. Is that okay? So desired capacity is the actual, what you want to start with. Minimum is no matter how bad things get, this is the minimum that I want to retain. Okay, or it doesn't matter even if we don't have any traffic at all, even if nobody is visiting our site, this is the minimum that I want to maintain. Okay, maximum desired is it does not matter how much the traffic is, right? If customers are really eating our website, as application is really getting a lot of heat, this is the maximum that we can do. Okay, so which means it doesn't matter, we can go above, all right, this particular maximum. And the thing about it is that when you set your minimum and you set your maximum, Auto Scaling Group is actually going to respect that, which means if you get a lot of traffic, if your application is getting a lot of traffic, it will not go outside, all right, that maximum that you have set. And that is one exam question that I've just given you here, because in an exam, you can get asked, that particular question, all right? Even in an interview, you can also get asked, okay, that particular question as to what will Auto Scaling Group, if you have a lot of traffic spike, will Auto Scaling Group increase your number of instances regardless of the maximum desired capacity? The answer is Auto Scaling Group will respect, okay, what you have actually said. So here we're just going to do minimum is 1, maximum is 2, all right, as well. So auto scaling optional, we can leave all of these. These are scaling policies. Scaling policies are basically, they're basically rules that you set that if things should go, sometimes, let's say, for example, you have a lot of traffic spike and your CPU usage is actually, reaching 100%, right? So you can say, you can create a rule, which is, in this case, it's what you call a scaling policy. You can actually create a scaling policy to say that, if the CPU gets to 80%, then there should be a scale, all right? Now there's what you call a scaling, and there's what you call a scale out. Okay, so which means if your CPU usage gets to 80%, you can decide to say your scaling policy should scale out. So scale out basically means increase the number of instances. So you can also say that if the CPU, utilization decreases, the average CPU utilization decreases to, say, let's say 40%, then there should be a scale in activity. So scale in means to reduce the number of instances. Scale out means to increase the number of instances. So you can scale in, you can scale out based on a number of factors. So it can be CPU utilization, it can be maybe network in, network byte in and out, it can be through input and output and all of that. Okay, you can use all of those things to actually define a scaling policy. So scaling is reduce the number of instances. Scale out is to increase the number, of instances. So take note of that. So I'm going to go next. And another thing you can also do is to add notifications. So if you want to get notified as things are happening with your auto scaling, perhaps an instance is launching, perhaps one instance is down, you want to get all of that information in your email, you can also add a notification. I mean, in some other videos, we're going to delve into the nitty-gritty of all of this, but I just wanted to, in this video, have an understanding of what, auto scaling is actually about. So go next, click next, and I think that's all you have to do, all right, and then create your auto scaling group. Now, the beauty of what we have just done is that now we didn't have to create the EC2 instance first. We didn't have to now go and create a load balancer, the target group and everything. The auto scaling group is actually going to create all of these services for us and update accordingly, all right? In the load balancer video, we had to do all of these things by ourselves. We had to first create the EC2 instance, and then after the instance has been created, we had to go to the load balancer section to create a load balancer. We had to go to the target group section to create a target group, and then connect the target group back to the load balancer, and then access our application through the load balancer's endpoint. But in this case, we've only done the configuration on the auto scaling group, page, and that will trigger, all right, all the things that should actually be created. So the load balancer will be triggered, the creation will be triggered, the target group creation will be triggered, the EC2 instance will be created automatically by auto scaling group. So basically, you can see auto scaling group as more like your EC2 instance setup automation on AWS, right? Without you having to do, all right, all of that. So if I click on my ASG right here, I can see that some activities are already going on. So I can see my desired, which is my actual. Like I said, you can see the minimum, you can see the maximum. And if I click on activity, I can see some activity going on right here. So here you can see that 2 instances were launched successfully. You can also see that load balancer target group successfully. I mean, everything has been added. All right, everything really successful. If you click on instance management, you can see here that you have 2 instances and the 2 instances are healthy. And another thing that I need you to pay attention to is what is the availability zone. So you can see that the auto scaling group actually deployed, okay, the 2 instances in different is 2A and 2B, because the desired capacity we selected was 2. So auto scaling group is intelligent enough to know that I cannot place the 2 instances in the same availability zone. I have to place them in different availability zone, so that if something happens in zone A, zone B can still be, serving our client without any kind of issue. Is that all right? So I can come back here now and I can go to my load balancers and take a look at that. All right, so my load balancer is still provisioning. All right, so it's still provisioning. And then I can come here to target group and take a look at what is also happening there. So I can see that my 2 instances are already, trying to register with the load balancer. Okay, and if I go here to instances, all right, and I refresh, all right, I can see my 2 instances right here. So, you can see that the process was actually automated for us. We didn't have to, go through all the, issues and all that. So everything has been done, all right, for us. So if I click here, I can take a look at what I have. Of course, I have a public IP, which is not the ideal way. Like I told us, we're supposed to deploy them in a private subnet and leverage, a NAT gateway. But just to help us to manage our cost, we had to go with, all right, the option of, just using the public, all right, subnet to demonstrate and to help our understanding of auto scaling group. Okay, so the instances are still initializing. So, all right, so now the 2 instances are actually ready. Now, let's check the security group. So we have the default security group. That is what we're using here. Okay, that's fine. And let's go back to the load balancer and let's see what we have. So the load balancer also is active. So let's look at the target group and let's see what we have here. So the target group is still registering. All right, so the 2 instances are actually healthy. Okay, so you can see that the 2 instances are healthy. So that means they were able to register with the load balancer, and the load balancer can actually reach these 2 instances. And so it tells us that the instances are healthy. So now the next thing we need to do is to go to the load balancer. grab the endpoint of the load balancer and try to access, all right, our website and see if everything, executed as we hoped. So let's see if we have, all right, so there you go. So greetings from IP, all right, so this is 238. And let's take a look at what the instance that is. So 238 is the second instance, right? All right, 11238. So that's what we see here. So let's refresh again, and then we can see that we're getting access from 119, dot 57. Okay. So here, click on that, and then you can see that 19.57 is also reachable. So if you refresh as many times as you want, you can see the power, all right, of auto scaling. Now, the auto scaling is not limited to just what we did. I mean, I told us about the scaling policy. I mean, if you're experiencing any traffic spike, you can tell auto scaling what to do. If certain, if certain resources, exceed, certain percentage, you can tell auto scaling to add more instances. And if the resources are not, utilized as they should, you can also tell auto scaling to what? To scale in as well, which is to reduce the number, all right, of instances. So with a little explanation and a little demonstration we have done today, I want to believe that you have an understanding of what auto scaling group is about, all right? And I mean, you get the idea. Now, if they ask you the purpose of auto scaling, I believe you should be able to talk about it and then, of course, give examples why auto scaling is beneficial. Okay, so thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next video. And also, today will be the last day of the GitLab CI/CD 0 to Hero series. I'm so excited. I mean, it's been 20-something days of sharing the GitLab CI/CD knowledge that we have in that space, and I'm sure a lot of people have been really blessed, all right, with that particular 0 to Hero series. And of course, the next series we're going to be having is going to be around Docker, okay, because we want to talk about Docker, what Docker is, Docker Compose, and how to basically set it up. And I'm sure it's going to be, all right, an exciting, all right, series as well. So make sure you subscribe, make sure you like, all right, and then until next time, I'll come your way. My name is Oluwaseun. Thank you so much, all right, for subscribing. Thank you for watching, and God bless you. All right, bye for now.